that, it's always shocking to me the depth of the corruption, and it's so sneaky, and buying off environmental organizations by saying, hey, we'll donate to your organization, just
that's
don't.
That's not how it's done. It's kind of important that the people in these organizations understand how it's done. They come in very benignly. They're waking up to the fact they got to fix the environment, and they want to pay for their sins, and whatever nonsense they tell you. Within 2 years, you're dependent on that money. If they take that money, the people working in your organization don't have a job. There's a thing called motivational blindness. Once that sets in, you really can't see it. You really can't hear it. And they do it with persuasion science. I mean, their people are really adept at this. You think the Chinese and Russians are good? They couldn't hold a candle to the oil industry. 50 years ago, Exxon knew the North Pole was going to melt if they continued to do what they were doing with fossil fuels. They suppressed that report. They know exactly what they're doing, but it's for short-term goals.
Yeah, to me that's a criminal behavior, and that they estimated it exactly. They said we're going to be at 430 parts per million in around 2020, and it's exactly what they said it was going to be. So they knew it, and they knew the consequences. They projected there were going to be environmental disasters, as you said, and they said, well, we'll make hundreds of billions of dollars, so we'll suppress this.
My experience has been, it's rarely said, it's rarely spoken. They just do it. You know how to get an advancement in the company. You don't have to say it. Rarely do you find those memos because they don't exist. You don't need to exist. I took the depositions of the people in Southern California Gas that were there when this blowout was going, and it was astonishing to me what they could be blind to. I was taking the deposition of their lead chemist, whose job was to test the gas and to make sure it was safe. Right? And she's issuing these reports for the month and a half that stuff was coming out of the ground about how safe it was, and it's just methane, and it's blah, 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 blah. But what had been occurring was she was thinking, after you scrub the gas, this is the constituent parts, which, although aren't good for you, aren't deadly either, right? As I'm talking to her, I said, so when you scrub the gas, what do you do with the toxic waste that you scrub out of it? Oh, we put it back into the formation. And they did that for 50 years. And I said, so 50 years, you've been using this as a toxic waste dump. Well, I wouldn't call it that, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, well, the gas coming out of that hole, was it scrubbed? And she literally got sick, had to stop the deposition and come back next week. It had never occurred to her that what she was saying had no basis in fact, because that wasn't the gas they were testing. You follow me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Motivational blindness. But yeah, do they put roadblocks every step of the way? I bought those street lights, over 10,000 poles, right? I bought them the city bought them for medicine. I wanted them to put LED lights on it. They wouldn't do it. Said it would take years to do the feasibility study and all that. So we bought them. It was we made a fortune on it because they were charging us $90 a pole for maintenance they never did. We were able to replace the lights at an enormous, and still have an enormous savings, because you don't have to maintain them. An LED never burns out.
Right.
And so right after we did that and announced the success of it, they passed an ordinance, cities can't buy the street lights. They clearly have way too much influence in Sacramento.
That's crazy, because Sacramento politicians who I've talked to are, by and large, very environmentally friendly and are trying to work for good things. Still, how could they maneuver that through the process? Obviously, manipulation and campaign contributions and the like.
In fairness, it's also because of the business model. We need to have utilities, right?
Yeah.
If, as more and more people no longer need their services, the people left do have a much greater expense. So how do you balance that? I think the way to balance it is utilities should not be private. You know, they are given all of the power of government. You know, they have a monopoly. They're actually quasi-government is what they call them. You know, when we go after them, we could use the eminent domain to get there. You know, the what's called inverse condemnation, where what they do is a taking. You know, that's our next move on PG&E. That backbone they put through the state. Farmers have to wait days, sometimes weeks, before they can plow their field over that pipeline. They didn't buy that easement, you know. I mean, they are exposed, is what I'm saying. There's just so much wrong with it.
Yeah, I agree with you that it should be a public good because, quite frankly, they're putting too many roadblocks in the way of a public good, and they're not. For what reason are we having PG&E in Southern California, Edison, essentially run our power business? It's really enriching them versus enriching our communities, enriching our state.
Guaranteed profits, by the way.
Yeah.
Guaranteed. Their rates are set in order for them to have the profits, you know? I mean, it might have worked when you needed to build it. Doesn't work anymore.
Right.
You know, what we're hoping to do with hydrogen, it'll be a city run for the citizens. So you don't have this gouging. I mean, people in this city cannot cool their homes in the summer because it costs too much. This thing is totally solvable today with today's technology. And we would pay less. The consumer would pay less.
Tell us a little bit about the microgrids that you are creating here in Lancaster, and I think that my understanding that's kind of a move away from the utility model, and to the extent that we can create microgrids that are not so much relying upon the major utilities, that we're more resilient to fires and things of that nature, power outages, and then we're not relying upon the utilities.
Well, to begin with, the most vulnerable part of our nation is the grid. If this thing with China gets worse and worse, right? Mm-hmm. All of that is built in China. You know, the transformers, we've outsourced almost the entire industry, and we have to bring it back because we cannot have that level of vulnerability at the outset. Resilience in a community, especially in California, when the San Andreas goes, it's 6 months before we can restore services. 6 months before we can restore water, you know, that you can take a shower with. I mean, we'll certainly be able to get water that you can drink, but that's all. You know, the more we can become with microgrids, we're safe from that. You know, shake all you want. We're going to be fine.
Well, tell us a little bit more about microgrids, because I would imagine many of the people listening to this may not know what a microgrid is.
Well, a microgrid is simply like if I wanted to power this building independent of the grid, it would be a microgrid. You know? And as soon as we get a little further along with hydrogen, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a fuel cell on it. You know? It'll be cheaper. And then I don't care in regards to power outages, because they're not going to happen to me. Now, we can do that with neighborhoods. And in fact, we are doing it. Our ordinance says if you build a new house, it has to be net zero. You have to produce enough power to power that house and store it. And we've been doing that now for what, 4 or 5 years. There's housing tracts. They're essentially microgrids. The law requires them to hook up to the grid, but there's really no reason to. But they're still having to pay Edison. There's a lot of ways to do it. What it comes down to is the storage of it. There's one development they're doing that's going to have flywheels in the ground. There'll be flywheels spinning. You don't even know they're there. But from the solar, it charges the flywheel. You get it spinning during the day, and it spins all night long, feeding that electricity back into the neighborhood. Right now, we're using the grid to exchange that power, but we don't need to. You know, the wall. I always like to bring this one up because, you know, most of the people involved in climate extinction are liberals, right? They're totally opposed to the wall. I'm opposed to the wall now. We need that labor source. You know, we don't have enough labor in this state or country. We need folks immigrating. It's just the way it is. Whether you like it or not, that is the state of the country right now. But within 15, 20 years at the outside, most of Central America, most of southern Mexico, most of the northern South America will be uninhabitable.